I'm Dr. Carl Schreck. In this video, I'll be talking about the winds during Hurricane Helene and all the tree damage that occurred as well. In particular, we'll be talking about how the remnant eyewall from Hurricane Helene basically came right up through our region, through the French Broad River Valley. And those heavy winds on top of 3 days worth of heavy rain resulted in tens of thousands of trees coming down. And that's a big part of what knocked out a lot of our power and communication lines, but also is providing fuel for wildfires that we'll be dealing with for years to come. Here I'm showing a map from the National Hurricane Center of the track of Hurricane Helene. Formed in the Western Caribbean, went up through the Gulf, made landfall in Florida, then went through Georgia on its way to South Carolina and Western North Carolina. Part of why I'm showing you this is that it was remarkable by how fast it raced through Georgia on its way to Western North Carolina. This is a graph from the National Hurricane Center looking at the forward motion, how fast the storm is moving, not how fast the winds are blowing, but how fast the storm is moving for all the storms that make landfall in the northern Gulf. And Hurricane Helene was one of the fastest on record at 28 miles an hour. So it really raced up through Georgia on its way to Western North Carolina, which meant it didn't have nearly as much time as most hurricanes do to weaken as it went inland. Here I'm showing a radar image of Hurricane Helene as it was passing through Georgia. The circles identify the inner core of the hurricane. The dashed circle is the eye, where you see clear skies, no rain in the middle of the storm. And then around it is this donut of the heaviest wind and heaviest rain associated with the eye wall. As we step forward and watch this loop through, you can see how that remnant eye wall goes right up through South Carolina on its way to us up in Asheville in the French Broad River Valley. Now, if I pause it about here, that's when we lost cell phone service in Asheville, at my house at least. And even on just like a normal summer day, I am constantly checking my phone to see what the radar is. So you can imagine with the hurricane approaching us, to see this is like the last image, seeing that eye wall on its way up towards my house was a very scary situation for me, not being able to track it minute by minute as it approached. Fortunately, I had some friends outside of the area that were able to text me updates, but it was still very scary watching this approach. This is an analysis from the National Weather Service office in Greenville, Spartanburg, of the heaviest winds that our area experienced. It's probably not too surprising that initially some of the heaviest winds were down south in South Carolina, since the storm was weakening as it made its way farther northward. Then there's kind of a relative lull of 60 to 70 mile an hour winds in yellow for the upstate and the southern part of the mountain area. And then there's another peak up northeast of Asheville. And that peak is associated with the ridgeline that includes Mount Mitchell, which is the tallest peak east of the Mississippi. And so as a hurricane moves inland, its winds are having to deal with a lot more friction from the earth, from the ground and the trees and everything else on land. And so the winds will tend to weaken in association with that friction. But when you go further up in the atmosphere, the winds are going to be kind of shielded from that friction by being farther up. And so these mountains like Mount Mitchell are sticking way up high into an area where they're going to have less friction and stronger winds. Now this map is showing the tree damage from the North Carolina Forest Service. And it's not too surprising that the brightest colors there are right along the area, not too far from that Mount Mitchell area where some of the strongest winds occurred. In fact, there are entire mountainsides where pretty much all of the trees are down from those high winds at those higher elevations. And we had about 3 days worth of rain that saturated the ground. So when these winds came through, in a lot of cases, the trees were brought up by their roots. And that meant that the following spring, I started seeing images like this one, where the tree had been knocked over by the winds during the hurricane, but its roots were still attached to the ground. And so after winter and when spring came, trees like this actually started producing new buds and starting to grow again. Even though they were leaning on their side, their roots were still attached. I'm sure there's some good metaphors in there. Maybe you can think of them for what that means for our region. But unfortunately, all those trees that are down also are fuel for wildfires. So also during the spring, we had quite a number of wildfires in our region. Now, fortunately, most of those wildfires were in relatively uninhabited regions, so there wasn't as much damage as there could be, although there was certainly plenty of bad air quality and smoke. But this is something that we're going to be dealing with for years to come. Most of the trees that fell during Hurricane Helene were hardwoods like maple and oak, and those aren't going to decay nearly as fast as some of the softer woods like pine trees. And so it's going to take a long time for these trees to fully decompose, and we'll be dealing with them as a risk for potential wildfires every spring and fall for several years. So in this video, we looked at how the remnant eyewall of Hurricane Helene came right up through our region in the French Broad River Valley. And because of several days worth of rain that really soaked the ground, the roots didn't have anything to hold on to anymore. So in a lot of cases, trees were completely uprooted from the ground. And those downed trees are going to be kindling for fires for years to come.